welcome to the REI Mastermind Network, where host Jack Haas gathers amazing stories from leaders in real estate investing. In each episode, our guests will tell you what they're doing that works, what they've tried that failed, and best of all, you'll learn actionable steps to take your real estate investing to the next level. Now, here's Jack with another value-packed episode.
We have Tom Cruz on the call, and Tom, I really appreciate your time here today. And before I start things off, I want to send everybody to this because I think they're in for a bit of a treat if they head over to free. You're offering a free Section 8 webinar.
That's
and you
correct.
Can find that at section8webinar.com. Great domain name. Make sure you use the number 8
Thank you.
in that. Because Section 8 is something that we haven't talked about much, but I feel that it's something that a lot of people should be aware of. And in some cases, some people might even avoid because of the perceived or perceptions around it. So let's start things off. I know that you have a pretty significant portfolio of your own.
Correct.
Let's start there. Like, how did you get into real estate investing?
Yeah, it was a complete accident. I had bought a condo right after college, and I lived in it for about a year, decided that I wanted a single family property, sick of living in a condo. I bought a dog, all the reasons why I would get it. So tried to sell my condo. This is right after '08. I had put 3% down on an FHA loan, so I had no equity in it, so I couldn't sell it. So I just decided to rent it out and see what would happen. And at the time I was renting it out for $500 over my mortgage. That was kind of the, light bulb moment for me was, wow, I'm doing nothing. Set it up on a Venmo payment every month. I had great tenants. I screened them very aggressively. I mean, to the point where I had lunch with them because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know who I was putting in this property. And that's really where it got me interested in it. Because here I was, spending $500 a month on a marketing client and spending weeks on reporting and work. Whereas here I had my Section 8 tenant, or she wasn't Section 8 at the time, regular tenant, at $500, and the scalability and the predictability of it was very nice. So
then after that, you started to acquire additional property.
Correct. Yeah. So what I did was I was doing marketing at the time. So I was doing website design, like I said, and local SEO. And I used that money along with the cash flow that I was retaining from my condo to buy my second condo. I already had, proven concept with my first condo. So I was like, let me try a second one. So I continued buying these $70,000 to $90,000 units. I quickly found out after getting several of those over, a 3 to 5 month span, that dealing with the HOAs and the COAs and the assessments and having my tenants fight with neighbors, that are in the same building, it wasn't worth it. And then I decided to go into the single family world. I went a little bit further upstream. I started at like $160,000 to $180,000 starter homes, brick ranch homes locally. I was only able to swing 2 or 3 of those because a 20% down payment on a $180,000 house, you're almost putting out $40K up front. And I wasn't able to make that much money. It took me like 4 or 5 months to be able to save that from my condo rentals. I was also doing wholesaling at the time. I started doing real estate wholesaling. It just took too long to be able to accumulate that much of a down payment. So that's when I went, to the other side of the spectrum, and I started buying $60,000 homes in non-HOA neighborhoods. And the first one that I bought the day after closing, I paid $55,000 for it. There was a tenant in there at $1,350, which should have been my first red flag. But the day after closing, the seller calls me. I was like, hey, we need to switch you over to Section 8. And I was completely confused, no idea what was going on. He's like, yeah, how did you think the rent was $1,350 on a $55,000 house if it wasn't Section 8? And I didn't know at the time. I had no idea. So I freaked out, jumped in, learned everything I could about it. Fortunately, the tenant on my first experience was very good. They were also disabled. So Section 8 was paying 100% of their rent. So, it was about as a good experience on the first one as I could have. Then I learned about inspections. I learned about managing them, the inspection process, learned about managing the tenants, learned about screening, because the screening process that we do in Section 8 is very different. So that's essentially I accidentally got into real estate and I accidentally got into Section 8. It's been a lot of accidents as far as getting away from my active source of income into passive real estate.
So the Section 8 thing actually happened by accident as well then?
Exactly. Yeah, I did. I had no idea when I bought that unit. The owner was probably around 85 years old. He was retiring, was sick of dealing all of his properties. He was just dumping them all. And owner was retiring. So I was able to acquire it from him. And I was able to get a solid loan from a local credit union, and they went as low as I think it was $40,000 loan at the time. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
Oh, well, that's really interesting. So, you brought up some of the things that you've learned along the way. Let's go down that short list that you had there.
Sure.
So I'm going to guess that with Section 8, you're experiencing some different things. You mentioned inspections.
Yeah, inspections are the biggest difference between Section 8 and a market rate tenant. With Section 8, they have annual inspections and upfront inspections. So when you first get a Section 8 tenant involved with the property, they want to come out and make sure the 3 S's: it's sanitary, structurally sound, and safe. Make sure that all the outlets work, all the flooring is in good shape, there's no massive holes in the roof, the foundation's not crumbling. And once you pass that, it's normally about an hour-long inspection. Then they give you a green light, and then they start paying you the rent, and the tenant can move in. So that process, the first few times, I mean, there's a learning curve. I mean, they will ding you on things that on a regular inspection, that you would never even consider. For example, I had a regular, probably 150 square foot kitchen, all with ceramic tile. And on the corner of one of the tiles, there was like a hairline fracture on it. That the tile wasn't even loose. It wasn't a hazard, but they considered a tripping hazard. So you have to pull that one tile, put a brand new tile that does not have a fracture on it, in order to pass the inspection. I've had, parts of the house on the exterior have some green moths or growth or algae on, the shady side of a house, and they'll make you power wash it. They're like, oh, that could potentially cause, holes or intrusions of water. So on a private rate tenant, market tenant, they would have never cared about a quarter of the bottom of the back of the house on the vinyl siding having some growth on it, but Section 8 will ask you to power wash it. So there are additional hoops you have to jump through. That's really the only difference. Everything else, a tenant is a tenant. If you screen them correctly, the probability of them causing problems is very low. Sure.
So, you mentioned the screening. Like what additional steps has your screening method changed when dealing with Section 8 tenants?
It does. So we kind of have like a 4-prong approach. We obviously check credit. We check credit, even if Section 8 is paying 100% of their thing, we're still making sure. I mean, that gives you a lot of background. If they have 4 foreclosures, 3 bankruptcies, a bunch of repossessions, there's going to just be ongoing issues with them. There's no way around it. There's going to be drama involved. There's going to be creditors involved. There's always something involved if their credit report is that ugly. So that's the first red flag. Then we look at background. If they have multiple violent felonies or, long incarceration periods and they just got out, and depending on what they did, that's obviously a disqualification. And then eviction history, any evictions whatsoever, it's an automatic disqualification. We're not even considering it. And then if they pass through all that, then we'll do a home visit. We'll have my property managers that will go to their property. We'll give them a 2 or 3 day notice and make sure that the property is in good shape. The best indicator of future results is, what they're doing currently or in the past. So we'll go by, check it out, exterior, interior. It takes 5 minutes. There's only so much you can hide in that time frame, right? I mean, if there's holes in the walls or if the rugs are soaked in pet urine, you can guarantee it's going to happen at your house.
So what kind of actions, let's say the tenant is going off the rails like that and they're damaging your property, like how quickly or what type of resolution do you typically enforce?
It rarely gets to that point because we've already done all the screening. But if it does happen, we do biannual inspections. So we have 2 inspections ourselves, and then Section 8 has theirs. So we're in the house at least once a quarter on average in a year. So if any of that happens, it normally doesn't get to be that bad because we're able to fix it beforehand. And it's just that's the big advantage of Section 8 is you have leverage. One email to their Section 8 counselor with pictures showing how they're treating the property and how they're breaking the lease in multiple ways. Then for the most part, they're going to fix it because they don't want to lose their voucher. If they lose that housing assistance, it's a federal program. They get blackballed for life. They will get their social security number ends up on a list and they just won't get assistance for their family forever. So it's a really serious thing. And for the most part, they do take it seriously. And if they get evicted, it's bad for them. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting that you're essentially using that program as your enforcement arm.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we do. Because we could send them one of our contractors over there, they can be as assertive as they want. But the second you call, their 80-year-old Edna property manager at Section 8, their counselor, and she emails them and says, hey, look, this is your last warning, any more breaches of the lease, we're going to have to pull the voucher. Or if we file an eviction action and we're successful in it and we send that eviction to Section 8, they'll pull them. They don't want that dealing with other landlords.
So I'm going to guess that does Section 8 typically, the rules associated with it vary from one state to the next?
It's a federal program, so it's obviously administered on a county level. We do see some nuanced differences. Obviously, it's different inspectors, it's different counselors. Some counties, I've heard some counties, they don't care as much. So if you complain about a tenant, they might say, hey, it's between you and the tenant, figure it out. The counties that I'm operating in, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Ohio, we've had good luck with it. Me and my property managers, I think it's a big part is how you start the relationship. I'm being very attentive to the inspector, making sure that everything he requests gets fixed. Because imagine the amount of people that he works with that just like balk at everything he says, that gives him an attitude, that doesn't fix what he says. We're on such good relationship with most of our inspectors that if we fail an inspection, which does happen, even with a checklist, they'll just say, hey, I'll mark you as passed. Send me some pictures later today after you fix it, and then we'll be good. And that's really the level of kind of trust that I force, I make my property managers do this. I have a checklist. If I'm out of state, I want before and after pictures. I require, videos so my property managers here can see the inspection as it goes on. So that's just the level of control you have to have, at least at the beginning when you're building that relationship with them.
So is majority of your portfolio then Section 8? Is
yes,
that what you focus on?
Correct. Yeah. So about 350 out of my 400 existing units are Section 8.
Oh, wow.
And the 50 or 60 that are not are regular tenants. We have a few Airbnbs thrown in there. A lot of the tenants that are not Section 8 are the ones that we've inherited from previous landlords that are good. We don't get rid of good tenants.
So, with all that being said, I'm sure there's when it comes to the acquisition of those rental properties, they're all single family homes?
For the most part, we do buy duplexes and triplexes. I try to avoid it if it's not sub-metered on a utility level because my name is not on any utility bill in my entire portfolio. It's just the easiest way to meet it. Your cash flow is if your power's in your name, they're running that AC with the windows and doors and everything open. They don't care. So if it can be sub-metered, I'm buying small multifamily. If it can't, then I'm just buying single family in non-HOA neighborhoods.
Are there any have you found that sweet spot regarding the acquisition on the price and the location and that for your residents?
Yeah. So moderate crime, sub $100,000, 3-bedroom, 1 or 2 baths, under 1,000 square feet. That is a gold mine for Section 8. Especially if you have vinyl siding and a decent roof and a newer HVAC, you have years of maintenance free, assuming you're screening the tenants correctly, tenant, headache free issues there. And then it's just ongoing.
Is there a maximum that you can charge in rent on a monthly basis then?
So Section 8 publishes what's called the fair market rent through their HUD website. So you can see what they will pay. They do waivers, meaning if you find a tenant that can't find housing anywhere else, they will pay above what that fair market rent is. We've seen it happen before, as high as like 15% over that. But it gives you a very good sense of what the market's like in that area. So if you go into a market and you're seeing a ton of houses, like in Akron, Ohio, for example, you could buy a move-in ready 3-bedroom, 2-bath for $60,000 in Akron. You're picking up a $50,000 or $48,000 mortgage if you finance, 20% down. That's going to be a $350 payment, principal, interest, the tax and insurance there are nothing. And Section 8 pays $1,200 a month on it. The cash flow is insane. Even with property management, vacancy, our turnover is so low with Section 8 that we don't even calculate vacancy into our cash flow numbers. It just doesn't, it really happens. And if we do get a vacancy, the wait for Section 8 to be on their program is 2 to 3 years. You can call any housing authority in the country that you want right now, doesn't matter what the county is, and pretend that you want to get on Section 8. And they're going to tell you, good luck, jump in the line. It's going to be 3 years before we can get to you. So there's a never ending demand of tenants on the program. They don't turn over for that reason, because where are they going to go? There's no other landlords scrambling to accept Section 8, right? The demand is so high and the supply of properties is so low that, we have units rented inside of 2 weeks every single time.
That's really interesting. So you essentially have a baked in constant flow of tenants? I mean, how?
Yeah, we don't market. We don't market at all.
You don't have to market at all.
No, the flow is find the property, close on the property, get the address, send it to Section 8. They will either advertise it through an email list to the existing tenants looking for housing, or they'll put a list in the housing authority, and that's it. They contact you. We have a funnel, application funnel. They go in, get pre-screened, pay their $49 application fee. And then from that point on, it's just, automated. And then
How soon do you get somebody in then? Let's say you close on a property, you get it added, like that whole process from to getting added to the.
From closing to tenant move-in is about 3 weeks if you do it right. From the closing, then you have, let's say, 10 days for finding tenants, screening tenants, collecting security deposits, scheduling inspection. The only bottleneck there is inspections and how if they're backed up, especially with COVID. We've seen it take 10 to 2 weeks for that. But once you pass the inspection, then they can move in same day, and then you're getting paid on the next billing cycle. So if, let's, for example, today is the 19th, if we close on the property today, found a tenant by November 1st, you're getting your payment for that entire period on December 1st.
So just to remind everybody, if you want to learn more about this, head over to section8webinar.com. I keep looking at my first line there. It's a free Section 8 webinar. It is. But it's just Section 8 webinar. Use the number 8.com for more information from Tom and his team. Yeah.
And you guys can also follow me on social media too. It's T Cruz NC if they want to contact me.
Yeah. You have a pretty big following on your socials.
Yeah. So TikTok is where I started. And that's T as in Tom Cruz, CRUZ NC, like North Carolina. And I'm also on Instagram. Those are the two big platforms that I'm on. And I'm answering DMs myself. So if you guys have any questions about Section 8, feel free to reach out.
So, this almost sounds a little too good to be true. Like what are some of the gotchas here?
Yeah. The main thing is you have to be careful where you're buying. A lot of people will fall into the trap of like, oh, it's cheap housing. Like, let me go buy the first one that fits kind of the criteria. But you have to watch out for crime rates. Just because people are on Section 8, they still care where they live. They don't want to live in, a drug trafficking corridor. They don't want to live where there's drive-bys. So the gotcha is property selection and market selection. If you're able to do that correctly, then there's really nothing else. The process to get a tenant in there is the same as like a market rate tenant, except you might want to do additional screening like I described, and inspections. If you have a bunch of units, like right now with us with 350 inspections, that's 350 inspections per year. Granted, they're obviously spread out pretty equally throughout the year, but if you don't have systems or people in place or software in place to handle that, it can be just one more bottleneck in your pipeline. But for the most part, there's no real gotchas. Don't be a slumlord. If you don't fix the problems that the inspector tells you, they will stop paying you until you fix them. And if you don't fix them again, they'll put it into an abatement process. And then you have to go through like an entire thing with the inspector, housing authority gets involved. But if you take care of the property, if the tenant is happy, they will stay there forever. I still have tenants that were there when I started real estate 8 years ago, or from my first property that I bought seven years ago for Section 8. So all of that plays into it. You have low turnover, you have higher than average market rents, you have a ton of properties that fit the bill. And these properties that are 70 grand, they're not like $250,000 properties where people are paying 30, 40, 50K over sticker or over asking for, right? It's properties that are in areas that don't have the huge appreciation that you're seeing in more, middle of the road housing. Guys, if you don't believe me, just go to realtor.com, type in Ohio and look at properties under $100,000 that are not under contract, and it will blow your mind what you can buy for that little money. Mm-hmm. And Section 8 does not care what you pay for the property. That's the magical part. You can literally pay $40,000 for the property. If it will pass their inspection and it conforms to their guidelines, and it's a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom or 4-bedroom, then you're going to get the rate that they're advertising.
So I suppose during the whole pandemic and the COVID thing, it probably did it impact you at all? We had most of the money from the state or federal government. So. Yeah,
we had the best year ever in 2020 because it was the perfect storm. We continued to get all of our Section 8 properties paid for. So we never had any lapse in debt service to any of our lenders or banks or institutions that way. And then everybody was looking for housing. Everybody was looking for properties. We have already everything set up with contactless showings. We have the doorbells or the locks that you can go in and schedule for. We already had everything in place. So we were still showing units. We were still renting units. We were almost at 100% occupancy, which has never happened ever. I think we got up to 98% occupancy on 400 units during the pandemic. So we were buying units. We were actively looking for units, acquiring as much as we could, because there's a lot of landlords that didn't have that set up. Imagine if you had 4 properties and you still have a full-time W-2 income, and your 4 tenants lose their job, and now you're stuck, with $5,000 a month in debt service. You can't swing it, and there was no support for them. So for months that happened, we were buying properties not at fire sales, not at '08 rates, but we were getting good deals, and that's because we hedged the bets on Section 8. So it's pandemic proof, recession proof, future proof, market proof. It's all the proofs.
Well, you mentioned keyless entry and a few other things. What other systems did you put in place to manage? I mean, the level that you're talking about, you was 400 properties.
Yeah.
You're managing 400. Most of them are single family homes.
Correct.
What type of systems or tips in place do you have for people to try to manage to scale to this level?
Yeah. So I had my own software built out called Cruise Control, coincidentally, and we use that to manage. It's just my own software that I built in-house, and it's designed for Section 8. So it splits invoices. It integrates with these different platforms that allow you to do these contactless showings. You can get deposits to, in order to give a key access. All of that's part of it. I'm not selling the software. It's just something that we use internally, but there's a lot of other good ones out there. I like Innago, Innago. I'm not a partner of them, but they can sponsor if they want. And that's what we used from before, and it worked really well. I've used all the AppFolios and Buildiums, and I think it's overrated. I think it's not very good software, honestly. And it's designed more for multifamily, multiple property managers, not investors that are looking to scale their portfolio.
Sure. Well, this is really interesting, especially this aspect and the focus.
Yeah.
It's one of those examples again of what you focus on grows, and you really found a niche here, and have really built out the importance of processes. I mean, and
that's really the only way to do it, especially with the financing piece, which we didn't really have time to talk about, but being able to, scale the financing aspect, finding investors, finding banks, portfolio lenders, finding hard money, that's all goes into just another funnel that I set up to be able to continue acquiring. But yeah, I mean, if you can get that down and no one's talking about it, Section 8 is not the sexy Airbnb. It's not the sexy, flips or the birds that everyone loves talking about, but there's nothing better from a predictable, guaranteed, and scalable way of growing a portfolio. There's nothing better.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I mentioned before. There's kind of a misconception, when you talk about Section 8, you automatically go to
the bad
trailer
place.
park boys.
Yeah. And that's the case. The way you have to think about it, though, which is the way that this investor originally told me, he's like, Section 8 is simply a payment method. If you get 2 tenants and you don't know if they're on Section 8 or not, they're the exact same, type of person that they're going to be going into the unit. One person might be paying with a cashier's check or a credit card, and the other person just happens to be using the federal government's wallet in order to pay you. And when you look at it that way, if you screen both tenants, you'll instantly find out if they're going to be a good fit or not for your property. So the way that they pay us, we don't care. The fact that it's guaranteed and it's on the first of the month, and we don't have any billing issues, we don't have accounts receivable issues. Our property managers can focus on managing the properties and not chasing rents every month. It works wonderfully.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate you giving us this time here today and chatting about this. Again, I want to direct everybody to section8webinar.com. And I got it right that time. Section8webinar.com for the free webinar on Section 8. Before I let you go, is there a question you wished I would have asked you here today?
Probably just back to financing. I think that would have been it. Like, how did I finance that many deals? I think a lot of, listeners are like, oh, great, you bought your first house. I can do that. Okay. How did you buy your 10th house, your 20th house? So that could always be something for another podcast.
Well, I think we could, if you have the time, we could spend a little time on that right now. How did you scale to this level?
Yeah. So a big part of it was you have to be creative. So my first 10 units that I bought were with Fannie Mae, traditional Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac financing. It was, 20% down investment loan deals through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, federally backed loans. They're conventional, and every borrower, they're limited to 10 finance loans, right, under Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. So after I hit that cap, I had to start looking for other alternatives. So the next step up was portfolio loans. I, started looking for local banks that would do in-house loans, credit unions, for example, that would say, hey, look, we'll give you in 5 units. That's our maximum exposure. We're okay with $500,000 or 5 units, whichever one comes first. So I'd say, okay, that's great. That's really not enough, because at this point, I was buying $70,000 houses. I was putting 20% down. That's only 14 grand. It took me maybe 2 months between wholesale deals and reinvestment of my cash flow to get to that point. So I knew that I could buy like 6 to 8 houses per year, but if a bank was only letting me do 3 or 4 at a time, I needed to be able to expand that. So I went to every bank in my community, and not the Wells Fargos, not the BOAs, not all the big institutional lenders. I was going to, First South National Bank, those kind of, there's one teller and one, vice president in there, and they can make the decision. And that's really helpful because they're a lot more liberal with their financing. They know the area. They're only lending within maybe 100 miles of where you're at. And getting an approval is a same day process. I bring my, W-2 tax returns. I bring whatever income I was making from my marketing company and that I was paying myself with a W-2. And then I also had cash that I could bring in and create a deposit relationship with them. Banks like that of that size, checking accounts are everything. If you can say, hey, I'll throw $10,000 in or $5,000 in, and oh, by the way, all the rents that I collect every month, I'll put into your checking accounts. They love that. So that's all part of growing it. And then obviously at some point I wanted to grow past the amount of down payments that I had. So I think that happened around 20 or 30 units. I wanted to I was sick of buying 1 or 2 at a time. So I had to look at other people's money, networking. And I already had a pretty extensive LinkedIn network. I had, local people that I'm a big car guy. So I go to a lot of car events. So I just started talking to people about real estate. I had to post a lot of this on Instagram and Facebook about what I was doing when I was buying these properties, kind of my Section 8 journey up until this point. And as everyone that's doing real estate knows, when you talk to other people about real estate, they already inherently know real estate is a good investment. They know that most people are, millionaires from real estate, or more millionaires are created from real estate than almost any other industry. So when you go to them with a track record, hey, look, I have 10 properties. I've Section 8 them. I'm making $13,000 a month gross. 6,000 of that is net income to me. It's guaranteed. And here's my last trailing 12 months profit loss, balance sheet, everything you need to see. Asking them for $500,000 to go buy another 20 units is not a big stretch. So that's what I did. I essentially started building partnerships with other people in my area so I can continue buying it. So you can actually Google Tom Cruz, Wilmington, North Carolina portfolio. And I had the largest single family portfolio acquisition in my county, in history in my county. It was 100 units, and we bought it for $6 million. Most of them were empty or had, just terrible tenants in them. We cleaned house. We, fixed up a bunch of the units. I reoccupied them. 2 years later, we sold it for $10 million. And that all came from forcing appreciation through Section 8. Most of the units were on Section 8. The buyer was ecstatic. I mean, he almost didn't believe it. He was asking for bank statement certifications. He wanted, CPA audited documents. He wanted everything, because he was like, there's no way you have almost 100 tenants on Section 8 paying you on the first of the month for months on end. It's when you look at most investors' portfolio, you have all these late fee charges, you have eviction charges, you have legal charge, you have all this other stuff. We didn't have that. We had a stable portfolio, mostly guaranteed rents. And from that point on, I did a cash out refinance on those 100 units. Those 100 units I sold. There was another portfolio with 80 units. I did a similar deal with my partner. Instead of selling it though, I did a cash out refinance on it. And I took that cash, I bought him out, because at the time we were buying properties at 5.5% interest rate. And a couple of years ago, it dropped down to 3.5%. So once I did that cash out refi, I was able to keep my payment about the same, pull a bunch of cash out. I bought him out, and then I retained those 80 units myself and added to my portfolio. So that's essentially the progression. Is over years of time, I now have a relationship with 6 different banks because they would each say, hey, look, I'll give you 3 here. I'll give you 5 here. I'll give you 4 here. And then eventually I consolidated all those loans into one bank with one commercial bank blanket loan. And now I'm able to go back to any of those and, hey, look, I need $1 million. I'm trying to buy these 50 units. Can you work with me? And it's obviously a lot easier because I have more collateral to lean against. So that was the financing aspect of getting to 400 units in less than 8 years.
Yeah. Wow. And 400 units, a lot of them, that's a lot. The reason that it perplexes me is, frankly, the only time I've seen anybody climb that many units so quickly are multifamily. To do single family homes at this scale is very impressive.
There's a lot of reasons for that. I don't like multifamily. There wasn't much to buy locally, so single family made more sense. I like the liquidity of it. I can easily go right now, take 10 single family houses at $150K a pop, sell them overnight. I mean, you know how fast it is. Appreciation when you own the dirt and those individual properties, I just feel appreciate at a much higher rate than a big apartment complex. I don't like dealing with on-site amenities. I don't like dealing with the competition from other apartment complexes in town. I don't like having to deal with tenant issues. My property managers hate dealing with the tenant issues living in that proximity. Section 8, homogenized like that. If you have a 300 unit apartment complex and they're all on Section 8, it becomes not the best living situation. So there's a lot of reasons why I didn't go multifamily and I stuck to single family.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's really working well for you.
Yeah.
Again, just a reminder, section8webinar.com. I really appreciate your time here today, Tom. Man. This was a great conversation and hope you'll come back again sometime.
Of course. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Have you learned at least one actionable step to incorporate into your real estate investing? If so, please consider returning some of that value by leaving a positive review, subscribing to our YouTube channel, or joining our growing network on Facebook and Twitter. You can find links to all of our social media accounts in the show notes. See you next time.